A deep hum vibrated through the walls of Frairen's ship as it hovered in orbit around an uncharted planet. He leaned forward in his seat, eyes fixed on the pulsating red dot on his console. A distress signal. Old, weak, but still active. That alone was strange enough. This region of space had no recorded settlements, no trade routes, and certainly no signs of human exploration. The message had been repeating for an unknown number of years, drifting through the void like a ghost waiting to be heard. Miss Rimiki's voice, calm yet laced with warning, cut through the silence. "Frairen, this is highly irregular. No human expeditions were ever documented in this sector." He smirked, adjusting the ship's trajectory. "That's what makes it interesting, Rimiki." The AI assistant materialized beside him in holographic form, her synthetic blue eyes flickering. She had been designed to be an observer, a voice of reason in the vast, unpredictable reaches of deep space, and right now she was doing her job well. "You assume this is a human signal," she said. "There are other possibilities, hostile ones." Frairen exhaled, his fingers tightening around the controls. He had spent his life chasing the unknown, unraveling mysteries that others feared to approach. But even he had to admit, this one felt different. There was something unnatural about how the signal clung to the void, refusing to die. The ship broke through the planet's atmosphere, turbulence shaking the hull as they descended. Below, an expanse of jagged violet-hued mountains stretched toward the horizon. The sky was thick with swirling mist, tinged in shades of blue and green. No signs of civilization, no structures, only silence. Yet the signal was growing stronger. Miss Rimiki's processors whirred. There, a structure beneath the surface. It's buried. Frairen landed the ship on a rocky plateau near the signal's origin. As the ramp extended, a gust of thick, humid air swept into the cabin. He stepped out cautiously, boots sinking slightly into the strange, moss-like terrain. The air was breathable but carried an odd metallic taste. Rimiki, projecting her form beside him, scanned the surroundings. "The entrance is beneath us." They moved toward the edge of the plateau, where a natural rock formation concealed what appeared to be a collapsed passage. Frairen knelt, brushing away layers of dust and debris until his gloved fingers met cold metal. He recognized the pattern instantly. This was not the work of any known alien species. This was human engineering. His pulse quickened. How was that possible? With Rimiki's guidance, he found a small console embedded in the rock. It was ancient, its surface cracked and corroded, but still functional. A single press of a button, and the ground beneath them trembled. Dust poured from the cracks as heavy metallic doors groaned open, revealing a dark, spiraling descent. Frairen activated his wrist light and took the first step down. The air was thick with age, carrying the scent of rust and decay. Walls lined with faded markings stretched into the darkness, their symbols eerily familiar. He reached out, running his fingers across the engravings, a language lost to time. And yet, somehow, he understood its meaning. "Welcome back." A chill ran down his spine. Rimiki's voice was barely a whisper. "Frairen, this is impossible." Deeper into the structure, the corridor widened into a vast chamber. Consoles covered in dust lined the walls, their screens dark and lifeless. Broken machinery lay scattered across the floor, as if something had once raged through this place. And in the center of it all, suspended in a cylindrical pod, frozen in time, was a human. Frairen's breath caught in his throat. The figure was a man, his body preserved in an advanced form of stasis. His features were sharp, his uniform unfamiliar, and on his chest, a symbol that no human alive should recognize, a sigil from Earth's forgotten past. Then, before Frairen could react, something shifted. The screens flickered. A deep mechanical hum echoed through the chamber. The pod's surface cracked. A single gasp filled the air. The man's eyes shot open. And then, with a voice that sent ice through Frairen's veins, he spoke. "They are coming." The chamber pulsed with an eerie hum, the faint glow of flickering monitors casting elongated shadows along the ancient walls. Frairen remained frozen, his breath shallow as the man inside the stasis pod stirred. The thick glass covering the pod shuddered before retracting with a sharp hiss, releasing a cloud of cold mist that curled through the air like restless spirits. The figure inside gasped, his chest rising sharply as his fingers twitched, then tightened into a fist. Frairen took a cautious step forward, his instincts warring between curiosity and caution. Miss Rimiki materialized beside him, her holographic form flickering with unreadable data streams. The frozen man, no longer frozen, blinked rapidly, adjusting to the dim light of the chamber. His eyes, sharp and piercing, locked onto Frairen with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "You?" the man exhaled, his voice hoarse from centuries of silence. He tried to move, but his body, stiff and weak from extended stasis, barely responded. Frairen hesitated before reaching out, offering his arm. The man grasped it with unexpected strength, his fingers pressing into Frairen's wrist. "They are coming." His words were urgent now, carrying the weight of something far beyond immediate understanding. Frairen exchanged a glance with Rimiki. "Who's coming?" The man struggled to stand, his breathing ragged. He was dressed in a uniform Frairen didn't recognize, though the insignia on his chest was unmistakably human. That alone sent Frairen's mind spinning. Humanity had no recorded history of traveling this far into uncharted space, so how was this man here? Miss Rimiki's voice was calm, but the analytical sharpness in her tone was undeniable. "Your biological readings indicate extreme temporal displacement. How long have you been here?" The man's eyes darkened. "Too long." He winced as he took another step, his muscles barely cooperating. Frairen steadied him, noting the deep scars along his arms, signs of past battles, battles fought in an era long forgotten. The chamber suddenly trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling, and a low, resonating sound filled the air, a deep frequency that pressed against their skulls like an unspoken warning. Rimiki's form flickered, her scanners flaring with sudden activity. "Something has activated within the structure," she reported. "And we are not alone." Frairen turned sharply, his hand moving instinctively toward the energy pistol strapped to his thigh. The dim glow of the chamber deepened as shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls. Then he saw it. Movement. Not mechanical, not human, but something else entirely. From the far end of the room, figures emerged. Their silhouettes were twisted, elongated, shifting between form and formlessness, as if reality itself rejected their presence. Their eyes, if they could even be called that, burned with a deep crimson glow, locking onto Frairen and the others with unsettling precision. The stasis survivor cursed under his breath. "They're already here." Frairen raised his weapon, his pulse hammering against his ribs. "Who the hell are they?" The man didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed Frairen's arm and pulled him back. "We don't have time for explanations. We have to move. Now." The creatures advanced, their steps soundless but the pressure of their presence unbearable. Rimiki's processors worked at blinding speed, analyzing every detail, but even she hesitated. "These entities do not match any known life forms," she stated. "They are aberrations." The air around them twisted, a thick, unnatural force closing in. The nearest creature lunged, its form snapping into unnatural angles as it propelled forward. Frairen fired. The energy blast hit the creature dead center, but instead of falling, it simply absorbed the impact, ripples spreading through its semi-physical body. "Run," the survivor ordered. Frairen didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed the man's arm and hauled him toward the exit. Rimiki's holographic form flared, sending a pulse through the chamber systems, triggering emergency lights and revealing more of the creatures crawling from the walls, emerging from the very fabric of the ruin itself. The trio sprinted through the dark corridors, each turn revealing more of the structure's vastness. Hallways of forgotten technology, doors leading to places long abandoned, whispers of an era buried under time. But Frairen couldn't focus on that now. Behind them, the creatures pursued, undeterred by walls or obstacles. They passed through solid structures, as if reality itself bent to their will. "Rimiki, I need an exit," Frairen shouted. The AI's voice remained steady despite the chaos. "There's a breach in the southern wall, 60 meters ahead." Frairen cursed under his breath. That was too far. But there was no other choice. He pushed forward, the survivor at his side, their breaths labored but their urgency unyielding. The creatures were gaining. Then the survivor, still weak from stasis, stumbled. Frairen turned, catching him before he hit the ground. But the delay was costly. One of the creatures surged forward, its form distorting into jagged tendrils. It lashed out, striking Frairen across the arm. A searing pain exploded through his body, not from impact, but from something deeper. Something inside him screamed as the force invaded his nerves, an overwhelming sensation of wrongness crawling through his veins. Rimiki's voice spiked in alarm. "Frairen, your vitals are destabilizing." The survivor gritted his teeth and pulled a small metallic device from his belt. "Close your eyes." Without hesitation, Frairen obeyed. The man pressed the device against the ground and triggered it. A pulse erupted, silent, but devastating. The chamber's walls rippled like water, and the creatures recoiled, their forms distorting as if caught in an unseen vortex. Frairen gasped as the pain in his arm faded instantly. When he opened his eyes, the creatures were no longer advancing. They stood frozen, trapped within an invisible barrier that flickered like broken glass. "That won't hold them for long," the survivor muttered. "Move." They burst through the crumbling southern wall, finally reaching the surface. The cool night air hit them like a wave, but there was no time to rest. Frairen glanced back. The ruins trembled as an unnatural darkness seeped from within, spreading like a living shadow. He turned to the survivor, chest still heaving. "Start talking. Now." The man's gaze was sharp, but filled with exhaustion. He exhaled slowly. "My name is Captain Varn." His eyes shifted toward the ruins, then back to Frairen. "And I was left behind to make sure humanity never forgot the war." The wind howled across the desolate landscape as Frairen Miss Rimiki and the mysterious survivor, Captain Varn, hurried away from the ancient ruin. The sky above them remained a deep, unnatural shade of green, streaked with shifting clouds that seemed to move against the wind. Frairen kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting the creatures to follow. But for now, they remained trapped within the ruins, contained by whatever strange force Varn had unleashed. Frairen's pulse was still racing, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. The creatures, the stasis chamber, the impossible existence of a human who claimed to be from a forgotten war. None of it made sense. Miss Rimiki's holographic form flickered beside him. "Your biometrics are stabilizing, but your neurological readings are irregular. The entity's attack left an imprint on your system. You may experience disturbances." "Great," Frairen muttered. "Just what I needed." Varn barely reacted, his focus fixed on the distance. Despite the weight of exhaustion in his movements, there was an urgency in his eyes. He moved with the sharp awareness of a soldier, every step calculated, every glance assessing potential threats. Frairen finally had enough of the silence. "Start explaining, Captain. Who were those things? And what war are you talking about?" Varn exhaled, slowing his pace as he turned to face Frairen. The wind rustled his tattered uniform, the insignia on his chest barely visible under layers of dust and time. "I don't know how much history you still remember," he said, his voice heavy. "But humanity wasn't always as it is now. We weren't just explorers. We were conquerors, survivors, and we paid the price for it." Frairen frowned. "I've never heard of any great war." "You wouldn't have," Varn said, "because they erased it." Frairen's stomach twisted. He had expected an answer, but not one so massive. Who erased it? Varn's jaw tightened. The architects. Miss Rimiki's processors whirred as she scanned through her extensive database. No historical records exist of such an entity. Of course, they don't, Varn said bitterly. That was the point. The ground trembled slightly beneath them. A distant, low-pitched rumbling carried through the air, like something shifting beneath the planet's surface. Varn turned sharply toward the sound, his posture stiffening. They know we're here, he muttered. We need to keep moving. Frairen followed his gaze, but there was nothing but jagged rock formations and endless terrain. There's nothing out there. Varn's expression was grim. That's what they want you to think. Rimiki's scans flared with activity. Anomalous readings detected, she reported. Unstable gravitational distortions approximately 3 kilometers east. Frairen narrowed his eyes. That's where the signal was coming from, isn't it? Varn nodded. That's where we need to go. Frairen hesitated, glancing back toward the ruins. The idea of going deeper into the unknown with a man who had been in stasis for centuries wasn't exactly comforting. But he had come this far. He needed answers. Fine, he said. But if I die, I'm blaming you. Varn smirked. Get in line. They moved quickly across the rough terrain, weaving between rock formations that jutted out of the ground like the ribs of a long-dead giant. The air grew heavier the closer they got to their destination, thick with an energy Frairen could feel in his bones. As they approached the coordinates, the ground suddenly gave way beneath them. Frairen barely had time to react before he was falling, plunging into darkness as a deafening roar swallowed the world around him. He hit the ground hard, rolling to absorb the impact. Pain shot through his shoulder, but nothing felt broken. A soft, mechanical glow illuminated the cavern around him, as Rimiki's hologram flickered to life. Frairen, are you functional? Still breathing, he groaned. He looked around, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. Varn had landed nearby, already on his feet, scanning their surroundings. What lay before them stole the breath from Frairen's lungs. It was an underground facility, massive, ancient, and eerily intact. Towering structures of unknown metal stretched high above them, their surfaces engraved with markings that pulsed with faint golden light. Pathways and corridors extended in every direction, leading to places untouched for millennia. And at the very center of it all stood a colossal vault door, its surface marked by the same sigil that had been on Varn's uniform. Varn stepped forward, his fingers brushing against the door's surface. It's still here, he whispered. Frairen pushed himself up, approaching cautiously. What is? Varn turned to him, his expression unreadable. The last archive. Rimiki's systems flared with activity. Explain. Varn exhaled. The architects erased our past, but they couldn't erase everything. This is what remains. The truth about what happened to humanity. Frairen stared at the vault, his heart pounding. If Varn was telling the truth, then everything he thought he knew about human history was a lie. Before he could respond, a sound cut through the stillness. A sharp, rhythmic clicking, like claws against stone. Frairen spun, weapon raised. The darkness beyond the vault stirred. Shadows moved unnaturally, shifting and reforming. The creatures from the ruins had followed them. But this time, they weren't alone. From the darkness emerged figures, not twisted and formless like the creatures before, but solid, armored. Their silhouettes were unmistakable. Frairen's breath hitched. Those air soldiers, Varn finished grimly. And they're not ours. The figures raised their weapons. The vault behind them pulsed with light. And then everything erupted into chaos. Energy bolts streaked through the cavern, searing the air as Frairen dove for cover behind a broken console. The soldiers moved with terrifying precision, their weapons trained on him, Varn, and Miss Rimiki. Their armor, sleek and unfamiliar, gleamed under the dim golden light of the ancient vault, their faces obscured by visors that pulsed with an eerie blue glow. Varn reacted instantly. With practiced efficiency, he ducked low, grabbed a piece of debris, and hurled it toward the nearest soldier. The moment of distraction was enough. He rolled forward, snatching a fallen rifle from the ground and firing a burst of red-hot plasma. The impact sent one of the armored figures staggering backward, their shielding flickering. Frairen gritted his teeth. He wasn't a soldier, but he wasn't about to die here either. He unclipped his energy pistol, peeking over the edge of his cover before squeezing off a few well-placed shots. Two more soldiers took cover behind ancient structures, their weapons humming as they returned fire. Miss Rimiki's holographic form flickered beside him. Tactical assessment. We are at a severe disadvantage. Engaging countermeasures. Her form pulsed, and suddenly, the ancient facility responded. Sections of the wall shifted, panels slid open, and dormant systems roared to life. A blinding surge of static energy crackled through the cavern, disrupting the soldiers' visors and forcing them to recalibrate. Varn took the opportunity. He sprinted forward, weaving between pillars of ancient machinery before slamming into one of the soldiers with full force. The two tumbled to the ground in a brutal struggle. Varn moved like a man who had fought this war before, precise, relentless. He pried the enemy's weapon from their grip, twisted their arm at an unnatural angle, and with a sharp snap, the soldier went still. Frairen fired at another, his shots punching through the soldier's armor. The figure stumbled, then fell. But the others were regrouping, their formations tightening, their movements eerily coordinated. "This isn't working," Frairen shouted. "We need to get inside the vault," Varn said, still catching his breath. "Now." Frairen hesitated. That vault contained the truth, the past, the war, everything that had been stolen from humanity. But if these soldiers were protecting it, what did that mean? Who were they fighting against? The soldiers pressed forward. One of them raised a gauntlet, and a wave of force sent Frairen crashing against the floor, pain jolting through his ribs. He gasped, trying to push himself up, but a shadow loomed over him. The soldier stood above him, weapon aimed at his head. No hesitation, no mercy. Then, before the soldier could pull the trigger, Varn was there. With brutal efficiency, he drove a blade into the weak point between the soldier's armor plates. The figure shuddered, then collapsed. "Move," Varn barked. Frairen staggered to his feet, gripping his throbbing side. Rimiki had already accessed the vault systems, her holographic form flickering with raw data streams. The massive door groaned, ancient mechanisms grinding against time itself as it slowly began to slide open. The remaining soldiers hesitated. The light spilling from the vault seemed to ripple unnaturally, distorting reality around it. Frairen could feel it, something vast, something waiting beyond the threshold. "They don't want us going in," Rimiki observed. "Which means we have to," Varn said. As soon as the door opened wide enough, they rushed inside. The moment they crossed the threshold, an invisible force slammed the door shut behind them. The sounds of the battle outside vanished instantly, leaving only silence. Frairen sucked in a breath. The air inside was different, lighter, charged with something unseen. He turned, taking in their surroundings. The vault was massive, stretching into infinity. Towers of data storage lined the walls, each containing fragments of history that had been erased from time. In the center of the chamber stood a massive crystalline structure, pulsing with light. Varn exhaled sharply. "It's still here." Frairen stepped forward cautiously. "What is this place?" Varn didn't answer right away. He approached one of the data towers, placing a hand against its surface. Instantly, the entire chamber responded. The crystalline core pulsed, and suddenly, the air was filled with holographic images, memories of a forgotten past. Frairen watched in shock as a scene unfolded before him. Armadas of human ships, larger and more advanced than anything he had ever seen, engaged in battle against an unseen enemy. Cities burned. Entire worlds collapsed. And at the center of it all, figures of impossible scale, beings that did not belong in this universe. The architects. Rimiki processed the data at blinding speed. "These are records of the war," she said, her voice uncharacteristically quiet. "The war humanity lost." Frairen swallowed hard. This really happened." "Yes," Varn said. "And when it was over, the architects did more than just defeat us. They rewrote history. They erased us from our own past. They made sure no one remembered." Frairen felt a chill creep down his spine. He had spent his life chasing the unknown, searching for the mysteries of the universe. But he had never imagined that the greatest mystery of all was his own species. Varn turned to face him, his expression dark. "Now you understand. Humanity isn't just scattered. We were broken. We weren't meant to remember any of this. But if we don't, we'll never survive what's coming next." Frairen met his gaze. "And what is coming next?" Varn looked past him, toward the crystalline core, where a new holographic projection was forming. It showed something massive, something approaching from the edges of the galaxy. Varn's voice was grim. "The architects are returning." The chamber pulsed with eerie light, casting shifting shadows across the towering data archives. Frairen stood frozen, his breath shallow as he watched the holographic projection flicker above the crystalline core. The image was vast, an impossible structure drifting at the edges of known space, radiating a darkness that seemed to swallow the surrounding stars. Even in its incomplete, flickering form, it was clear. Something was coming, and if Varn was right, it was bringing the architects with it. Miss Rimiki's processors whirred with activity as she analyzed the data flooding from the vault, confirming presence of an unidentified structure beyond the outer galactic rim. Energy readings are anomalous, comparable to pre-collapse architect artifacts. Frairen tore his gaze away from the image. Pre-collapse. Rimiki's voice took on an uncharacteristic hesitation. Before the loss of historical records, before humanity's erasure. Varn exhaled sharply. "That thing is waking up, and when it does, the architects will return." Frairen's mind reeled. This wasn't just history anymore. It was a warning. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath them. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the vault, the crystalline core surging with violent energy. Symbols and data streams scrolled across the air, shifting too fast for even Rimiki to process. Frairen instinctively reached for his weapon, even though he doubted it would do much against whatever was happening. "I don't like this." Varn moved toward the core, placing his palm against its smooth surface. The instant he made contact, the entire vault reacted. A surge of information blasted through the chamber. Memories, fragments of voices, battle cries, warnings, echoed through the air like ghosts trapped in time. Humanity's defiance cannot be tolerated. They will forget. They must forget. The cycle will begin anew. Frairen staggered back, clutching his head as the voices clawed at his mind. For a brief, terrible moment, he saw it, the war as it had been. The sky split open with fire, worlds reduced to ash. Colossal figures, barely comprehensible in their scale, moving between the stars like gods enforcing their will. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the vision stopped. The chamber went silent. Frairen gasped for breath. His legs felt weak, his entire body trembling from the sheer weight of what he had just experienced. Varn pulled his hand away from the core, his face pale. "They didn't just erase history," he murmured. "They'd erased resistance." Frairen forced himself to stand. "What does that mean?" Varn turned to him, his expression dark. "It means every time humanity has tried to rise again, the architects have wiped the slate clean. They don't just defeat us, they reset us." Frairen felt ice settle in his veins. "You're saying this has happened before?" Varn nodded grimly. "Over and over. We rebuild. We grow. And just when we start to remember, they come back." Frairen clenched his fists. "Then how do we stop it?" Before Varn could answer, the vault shuddered violently. A warning alarm blared, a sound ancient but unmistakably urgent. Miss Rimiki's systems flared with activity. Hostile forces have breached the outer facility. Estimated time to direct contact, 1 minute. Frairen cursed under his breath. The soldiers. Rimiki's form flickered. Unknown, but they are not alone. Varn straightened. They wouldn't attack unless they had orders. He turned to Frairen. We have to get out of here. If the architects know we've accessed this data, they won't stop until they bury it again. Frairen looked back at the crystalline core. We can't just leave all this. Rimiki's voice was urgent. I am transferring all accessible records to my internal database. However, the volume of information is beyond my storage limits. Data loss is inevitable. Frairen hesitated, then nodded. Take as much as you can. The vault door shuddered under an impact. A deep, grinding sound echoed through the chamber as something massive began forcing its way inside. Varn pulled Frairen toward a side exit. We're out of time. Move. They sprinted through the vault's corridors, the lights flickering wildly around them. The tremors grew stronger, dust and debris, falling from above as the facility's ancient structure struggled to withstand the assault. As they neared the exit, Frairen risked a glance back. The crystalline core pulsed erratically, its once stable glow now fluctuating in chaotic patterns. The vault wouldn't last much longer. Just as they reached the outer passage, the main doors burst open behind them. Frairen caught only a glimpse, a towering figure wreathed in shifting darkness, its form barely contained within reality itself. And then they were running, the echoes of something vast and ancient closing in behind them. The tunnels beneath the vault stretched on endlessly, a maze of ancient corridors and forgotten passageways. Frairen sprinted alongside Varn, his breath coming in sharp gasps as the tremors from above intensified. Miss Rimiki flickered in and out of coherence, her systems struggling to keep up with the sheer volume of data she had absorbed. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. It was more than just the soldiers now. Something else had entered the vault, something far beyond human understanding. Frairen didn't dare look back. He didn't need to. He could feel it, a presence so vast that it pressed against the edges of his mind like a storm waiting to break. Varn led the way, his steps sure even as the ground beneath them cracked and shifted. He had been here before, in places like this, relics of a forgotten war, hidden from time itself. His expression was grim, his jaw clenched as he scanned their surroundings for an escape. Frairen's mind raced as they moved. He had seen the war, not through textbooks or fragmented records, but through the vault's own memory. He had felt it, the sheer scale of destruction, the hopelessness of a species fighting against something that could erase them with a thought. And yet, here they were, running, surviving. He wasn't sure how long they ran before they reached an opening, a massive hangar-like chamber lined with towering structures, their surfaces covered in unreadable symbols. In the center of the space stood a ship. It was unlike anything Frairen had ever seen. Its design was sleek, angular, and pulsing with dim golden light, as if it had been dormant for centuries and had only just begun to wake. It wasn't human. Varn skidded to a stop. We take that ship. Frairen stared at him. Are you insane? That thing doesn't belong to us. It does now, Varn snapped. He was already moving toward it, his fingers skimming across the surface of a control panel near the entrance. Symbols lit up beneath his touch, and with a deep mechanical groan, the ship responded. A boarding ramp descended, revealing the dimly lit interior. Miss Rimiki's holographic form flickered beside Frairen. This vessel's technology is highly advanced. The interface appears to be partially compatible with human neural systems. Frairen's stomach twisted. Meaning what? Meaning I can fly it, Varn said. He turned, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the chamber. And we need to leave. Now. A low, resonant sound vibrated through the air. It wasn't a roar or a mechanical alarm. It was something deeper, a presence, shifting at the edges of reality itself. Frairen's instincts screamed at him to run. He didn't argue. He followed Varn up the ramp, into the ship's interior. The moment they stepped inside, the walls pulsed with light, as if recognizing their presence. Varn moved with purpose, heading straight for what Frairen assumed was the cockpit. The space was lined with controls that didn't resemble any human design. Yet, as Varn placed his hands on the interface, the ship seemed to adjust to him, panels shifting, symbols rearranging into something vaguely recognizable. Miss Rimiki interfaced immediately, her data streams pouring into the ship's systems, engines activating, structural integrity at 67%, flight capabilities intact. Frairen barely had time to strap himself into a seat before the entire ship jolted beneath them. A deep hum filled the air, vibrations running through the floor as the vessel powered up. Outside, the shadows moved. Something was in the chamber with them. The entrance to the hangar was massive, leading out into the underground cavern system. But between them and that exit, the darkness coalesced. Shapes began forming, humanoid, but not. Their outlines flickered, shifting between forms, their very existence unstable. Frairen's breath caught. What are those? Varn's hands moved over the controls. The Architect's enforcers. They're here to make sure we don't leave. The ship responded to his touch, engines roaring to life as the thrusters engage. The figures outside reacted instantly. They moved as one, advancing toward the ship with eerie, synchronized precision. Then they attacked. A wave of pure energy surged toward the vessel. The ship's interior flashed with warning symbols, but before Frairen could react, Varn slammed his hands against the controls. The ship lurched, engines firing at full power as it lifted off the ground in a sudden, violent motion. The energy blast struck the hangar floor just as they rose, shattering the ground where they had stood moments ago. Frairen was thrown back against his seat as the ship accelerated. Get us out of here. Varn didn't need to be told. He pushed the vessel forward, angling it toward the exit. The figures below didn't stop. More energy blasts filled the air, streaking past them as they weaved through the cavern. The tunnel ahead was narrow, barely wide enough for the ship to pass through. The walls blurred as they sped forward, vibrations rattling through the hull. Frairen gritted his teeth, watching as the opening to the surface appeared in the distance, a jagged slit of light in the darkness. Miss Rimiki's voice cut through the chaos. Energy surge detected, above us. Frairen barely had time to register what she meant before something else appeared. A second ship, not like theirs. Larger, its surface pulsed with an unnatural glow, its form shifting as if it weren't entirely bound by physical space. It was waiting for them outside the cavern, hovering like a predator ready to strike. Varn's expression darkened. They knew we'd try to run. Frairen's pulse pounded. Can we fight that thing? Varn's hands tightened on the controls. Not in a fair fight. Frairen's heart sank. So what do we do? Varn didn't hesitate. We don't fight fair. Before Frairen could argue, Varn slammed the controls forward. The ship dropped. A sudden, stomach-wrenching plummet back toward the cavern floor. The enemy ship reacted instantly, adjusting its trajectory to follow. Frairen's gut lurched as they twisted through the underground passages, weaving between jagged rock formations at breakneck speed. The enemy vessel followed, its weapons charging. Miss Rimiki processed the situation in microseconds, engaging countermeasures. Panels along their ship's hull shifted. A burst of energy flared behind them, a pulse of raw electromagnetic disruption. The cavern walls shook violently as the energy wave expanded outward. The enemy ship faltered. For a brief second, its form glitched, as if struggling to hold itself together in real space. That second was all Varn needed. He pulled the ship upward, engines burning at full capacity. The vessel shot toward the cavern's exit just as the enemy vessel recovered, too late. With a final deafening roar, they broke through the surface, bursting into open sky. Frairen gasped, barely believing it. They were free. But their victory was short-lived. Miss Rimiki's scanners flared with urgency. Multiple signals detected. We are not alone. Frairen looked out the viewport. His stomach dropped. Above them, in the vast emptiness of space, ships were appearing. Not one, not two, but dozens. Their designs were ancient, alien, unlike anything humanity had ever built. And they were waiting. Varn's expression was unreadable. They know we're awake. Frairen swallowed hard. The architects were here. The stars stretched infinitely above them, but Frairen could only focus on the fleet that loomed like silent sentinels in the void. The ships were colossal, elegant yet terrifying, with surfaces that shimmered as if they were not entirely bound by physical laws. Their presence was overwhelming, radiating an aura of control, of inevitability. The architects were here. Frairen's grip on the chair's armrest tightened. Tell me you have a plan. Varn's jaw was clenched as he adjusted the ship's trajectory. Survive. Miss Rimiki's voice remained steady despite the escalating situation. Analysis complete. Architect vessels are operating in a phased state, partially outside real space. Their weapons are charging. Frairen swallowed hard. So they're not going to talk. Varn didn't even look at him. No, we're an anomaly. Anomalies get erased. The ship vibrated violently as the first shot was fired. It wasn't a simple energy blast or projectile. It was something deeper, something that made Frairen's skin crawl. The space around them warped as the attack moved toward them, as if reality itself was bending under its presence. Varn yanked the controls to the side. The ship twisted sharply, avoiding the attack by mere meters. The distortion left behind flickered unnaturally, and Frairen didn't need to be told what would have happened if they had been caught in it. We can't outgun them, Frairen said, trying to keep the panic from his voice. Varn gritted his teeth. We can outthink them. Miss Rimiki processed thousands of potential escape routes in a fraction of a second. Nearest escape vector leads toward the collapsing remnants of a dark matter anomaly. Navigational risk, extreme. Frairen exhaled sharply. And if we stay, survival probability, 0. Varn's decision was immediate. He pushed the ship's engines to their limit, banking hard toward the anomaly's last known location. Then we take the risk. The enemy ships adjusted instantly, their formations shifting to intercept. They were faster, more coordinated, their presence pressing against the edges of Frairen's mind like an unseen weight. Then something even worse happened. The lead architect vessel pulsed. It wasn't just an attack. It was a message, one Frairen felt rather than heard. You do not belong. A sharp, searing pain tore through his skull. Frairen gasped, clutching his head as images flashed through his mind. He saw Earth, not as it was now, but as it had been before. Before the architects erased their past. Before humanity was reduced to forgotten children playing in the ruins of something greater. And then, just as suddenly, it was gone. Frairen's vision cleared in time to see the anomaly appear before them. A swirling rift in space, a tear where the rules of physics frayed and twisted. It was their only chance. Varn didn't hesitate. He angled the ship directly toward it. Behind them, the architect vessels moved as one. They were closing in, their presence overwhelming, the certainty of destruction tightening around Frairen's chest like a vice. Miss Rimiki's processors flared with activity. Turbulence beyond the threshold is unpredictable. This vessel may not withstand the pressure. Varn didn't slow down. Then we hope it does. Frairen forced himself to breathe. The anomaly was close now, its presence warping the very fabric of reality around them. The architect ships weren't slowing. They were following, confident in their ability to erase what should not exist. Then, something changed. The ship's core flared with golden light, energy pulsing through the structure. Symbols along the walls of the cockpit shifted, rearranging themselves. It was as if the ship was waking up. Miss Rimiki's voice came sharp and urgent. The vessel is responding. Unknown energy signatures detected. Origin, undetermined. Frairen barely had time to process her words before the ship moved. It wasn't just acceleration. It was a shift, a folding of space around them. For a brief moment, Frairen felt weightless, his body untethered from reality. Then the ship snapped forward, launching into the anomaly. The last thing he saw before the world vanished was the architects, watching. And then everything broke. Time twisted, space unraveled. Frairen's mind struggled to comprehend the sheer scale of what was happening as the ship was thrown through the rift, past anything that could be called reality. He saw glimpses, worlds that never were, echoes of civilizations erased before they could begin. And at the center of it all, something waiting, something watching. The ship slammed back into existence, the force of the transition sending Frairen reeling. The cockpit lights flickered violently as systems recalibrated. Frairen's breath was ragged. Did we make it? Miss Rimiki's voice, for the first time, held uncertainty. Location, unknown. Frairen forced himself to look outside. His stomach dropped. They were no longer in known space. Instead, before them stretched a vast, endless expanse filled with structures too massive, too ancient to have been built by any civilization Frairen had ever known. And at the center of it all stood a single monolithic station, its surface covered in golden script that pulsed in rhythm with their ship. Varn exhaled slowly. We didn't escape. Frairen swallowed hard. Then where are we? Miss Rimiki processed the data, her voice barely above a whisper. The origin. Frairen's heart pounded. They weren't just beyond the reach of the architects. They had gone back to where it all began.